Greetings, market rebels, and welcome to this week's macro measure video combined with our sector situation video. Here is our trustee market rebellion disclaimer. Here is our trustee market rebellion intellectual property rights notice. And here is, looks like something's out of order. Let's skip over that one. Yes, there it is. So this is last week's slide. Again, I'll introduce myself. I'm jumping right into it because I want to get this out in everyone's hands. I think some good info here from UOA that I'll share shortly. But this is just a quick review of last week's slide. We were calling it Days of Drama and Discord. We were talking about a variety of things as we often do. We talked about how I think things should have gone in a certain way and they really didn't before that, and so we could be concerned. We should be concerned. There were a lot of things swirling, and we basically did the old keep your DEFCON shields up. I think for the third, I want to say it was the third week in a row. So again, I will then. That's our quick review. I'm going to go right into this week's slide, and then again, just welcome all you market watchers everywhere. And just note that I got started probably at about 3:05 p.m. here on the East Coast. And again, I'm Wayne. So this week, pretty simple. I'm keeping it real simple for now. I've just got so much happening, trying to address so many things. So keeping it simple, go to 2x on the playback if you can. I still think it's super interesting right now, super spectacular drama potentially. But here's the nuts and bolts of everything. This is completely straight to the charts after this, and then really stream of consciousness because again, I'm just not in a position where I have the time to really pull it all together as I'd like to. But we had wild action again, and we had the typical late week save off key support levels. But it's very impressive. This today's move is very impressive, I think, in a lot of different ways, and I'll show you some of the UOA. I think some bigger players that play in big stocks in a big way with expensive options think that we're on the cusp of an up move here, right? A recovery or maybe an extension to the bull market. So we'll see. But that's where I arrived at after evaluating things quickly and just seeing the UA. You know, it was very violent under the surface in this market. Certain stocks and certain spaces got roughed up in a very big way. So we did get deeply oversold in some areas, and sentiment got pretty bad, CNN type fear, if you will. And so I think today, right, barring something news-wise, you were probably set up for the standard issue late save of the market that we've all become accustomed to seeing over the years. The indices themselves had essentially a garden variety pullback, but as I noted, there was so much that in terms of damage done to certain names and spaces, so much fear that even the VIX, which has been moribund, really got, I think, into the mid 20s, which it's been doing a little bit of lately. But so there was at least that, but that's where it's retreated from many times as well. But what's happened here to me should have primed the pump for a rally attempt. So more than just today. Now, we always approach it with a news neutral assumption. So doing that, I'm just going to cut right to the chase and say, like, bottom line is uptrends are still intact. The gang through today's charts and UOA, and the chart reading myself, just not only just today, in other words, not only just today's strong candle, but this reversal and the juncture at which these charts are at in the major index ETFs. I don't think there's any way to conclude anything else but expect a rally attempt. I think this is going to try to continue into next week, and I do think that you should probably not worry about carrying your DEFCON shield. Remember, this is a news neutral assumption. I think you don't want to put it away. You want to remember where you left it, but you probably don't need to be as concerned as we have been for the last 3 weeks, given just the objective take on the charts. I'm calling it objective. You might think it's biased, but we'll see whatever once we get into that. But I will show this stuff. I did allude to that line right there. These all corrected to key SMA support, those three. The diamonds, on the other hand, they went absolutely bonkers to the upside. They held in there really strongly all week, and today they're having a really big breakout style candle through really a consolidation that's taken up much of 2026 to this point. So the Dow or the diamonds essentially sidewaysing for most of the year, and now it looks like they're ready to go. The XLB, XLK, XTN, all those things, and XLE, and even XLF, which corrected but looks ready to run again potentially. So a lot of good things happen by week's end despite it all. So um, markets have been trading with tension, shakiness. That's been the case in my book at least. And I would say, but all is well, question mark. It seems like all is well. It seems to me like you ought to at least try to move up a few percent. Now, what we run into once we do move up a few percent, I don't know. That at that point, I just don't know. We could have another failed breakout. It really, I think you probably attack the all-time highs and in spiders and probably IWM. Diamonds are already doing it. Qs have the biggest lift there. So let's get into that though. We're going to quickly pause. Let me find my stop share, and then we will get into the charts and just whatever else comes to mind. Another busy week news wise, another busy week UOA wise. Let me try to show the number three screen. Number three is the one here. So this is what I'm talking about today. So this is a look at UOA, new UOA Pro ideas from today. Um, there might be, actually, there should be one more here. I think there was, where was that one? Oh, there it is. Let me just move it down ever so slightly. Too much, of course. I want to get the TSM there so everyone can see that. Oh, a little too much. Great. I don't know why it's giving me such a hard time. All right, let's try again. Enough of that. I'm just going to leave it there. We'll just cover it. But yeah, I'm trying to get at, right, this started out, I was readying other ideas that were longs that I said, oh no, I've got to get these in because we've had this really ugly under the surface action that I do think created enough of a mess for many and psychologically created a mess for many and also probably created an opportunity, for others. That's how I'm looking at it. And so when these few names hit, I kind of abandoned other ones that have since or subsequently, I should say, lifted a little. I might still go back then, depending on how things open up on Monday and how if we retreat a little bit, give a little back at least in the morning, and then go from there. But we'll see. I'm not predicting that, by the way. But you can see the names here are enormous, right? These are some of your bigger names. So Taiwan Semi, MU, Microsoft, Tesla, RTXs. I think that isn't that is that Raytheon or what was Raytheon? Google, XLC, which is just I'm slapping that in there just in case because it's been very hard to come by sector ETF put side activity. There's definitely a good chance that this is a put buyer hedging a long position they're taking in maybe certain names in the sector. And then Avgo. And then I don't have the updates shown, but we did recently had a bullish Apple idea. And in Apple, we have had two updates today. So let me see if I can bring those up. So that is really obviously that is, obviously everyone knows that's a big name. Let me do the update type and flip that around. And then here you can see, you could have seen, I guess the site doesn't like what I'm doing, but you could see that just we had the idea. I'm showing only the idea came in last week, right? But there's been updates of bullish call buying on Apple, right, all the way through. So even today we had two more. So I mean that obviously, right? I'm just doing that. Just that bodes well. But getting back to the other comment I was going to make that I always cut myself off from, but um, basically, right, all these names today, these are I probably could have gotten other ones in, but I wanted to make sure I got these bigger names in because I think a lot of those are either very strong, like MU, TSM, um, Google, or they have major bounce back potential like Microsoft does. So, right, these are big names, and that there's a lot of bounce back potential there. So I had to prioritize those, and there's probably about 8 new ideas in the service. Though the service is set up to actually just deliver 10 to 20 names. We usually exceed that new ideas wise per every week. It's not even hard to get to there because the market's become so active from when we originally launched the service. Options trading just continues to explode. But when you get these kind of choice names appearing, bigger names, you have to really respect that. So my point is that someone or some folks, what have you, some players appear to have stepped in a big way, and they've bought some, in some cases, rather expensive out of the money calls that are longer dated and put big money to work thinking, I think that they think there's going to be a rebound. Now, one of the interesting ones was Microsoft where they didn't spend that much. Okay, but they did. If you think about the stocks trading at 400, someone's buying the 485s. Now, I don't know if they think they're going to go in the money. Maybe they do. But there is a gap in the Microsoft chart way back there, right? So if they do really extend this market's rally and Microsoft does start to work its way back, right, they might just be playing this game where in kind of a super squeeze move, right, all the way back, Microsoft, this turns it from a lottery ticket to an extraordinary home run. That could be the game they're playing there. And so I just wanted to mention that one in particular, but I'll show one more just because I'll try to remember which ones. Let me see. I think they spent a lot more money in oh, you know what? I've got to go back to my bad. I've got to go back to just the main page here. So let me try to get one from here. Give you an idea on like maybe I think there was definitely more money spent here than 60 cents per call. Yeah, so here's an idea. This one, but this one's a smaller size. So I'm not getting the ideal one. But I'm trying to show you where they put some decent money to work per contract, and it was big contract size. And some of them were even longer dated, but a lot of them are Feb and March. A lot of it was March. So there's a lot going on there that someone has decided to step in. And this is just a little smattering, right? These are the big names. But I would say, this week was very funky in that we didn't really have a week where I would say it was the week itself wasn't all that great in terms of UA. It almost felt like a lot of players were sitting it out. They were maybe, I don't know, stunned, reluctant. A lot of people don't like to trade the downside. Maybe things were going off the rails, and they were like, okay, maybe they were like going off the rails, and they were thinking, okay, I'm just going to wait this out and see what happens, see if we support where we should. Let's see if this is the right chart that I'm after. Yeah, I can pull this one over for us. So again, I'm going to ask you to ignore everything. I cannot get these indicators. Even I took these indicators completely off, not just turned them off, but took them out of my mix. And they, it's still, even though they're not supposed to be displayed, they're still displaying. I have no explanation for this, by the way, but something's funky. Anyway, you can see this is that EPS reaction. That's a 478 low. Remember, they bought the 485 calls, and we're talking about March, I believe, on that one. Here's the 200-day in purple. So it almost to me, and I've seen this happen before, and so to me, right, after this has been a crushing sell-off, right? You didn't quite go down $100, but Microsoft just lost, right? If you think about how quickly Microsoft just lost major value, very significant market cap. So I would think that under bullish circumstances, right, if the market continues to act well, and I just feel very strongly, you don't often hear me say that, but I do feel very strongly that this kind of a turnaround is textbook and perfect for the gang, perfect for bulls, because this is a nice clear out move here on the 100. We not only did you fall below the 100 and close right on it and keep everything in suspense, but you actually took this low out here for anyone that was trading against that as well. So to then do this and then really do the SMA, widely followed SMA turn and burn and put this kind of a candle together, it's really potentially very powerful, even more powerful right than this one right here or this one right here, right? Because this is really a strong candle here. So especially with the UOA I'm seeing, the way they're coming back now, you could say, well, wait a minute, what happened? Aren't you forgetting that you've got this big 690 number and you're really not comfortably above there? And I think you'd be right to point that out. I've been harping on that level. We played around with that level a ton again this week before finally giving way. But what I'm looking at is this is a fresh bullish cycle, right? I don't know what happened because I actually did have my I did have my numbers up here, but for some reason they're not on there anymore. In other words, the count I use that some people like to say like, okay, who's in control? Basically, it's the bull bear control counter is what I call it. But having added that line right there that you just saw me add, you push through. That was your most aggressive form of resistance in my book, along with the 50, which is right there in gold. And you just blew right through both of those. No surprise, very oversold, turn and burn maneuver, clear out maneuver, lower low, the whole works. Fear ratchets up. Things are getting annihilated off camera, so to speak. Lesser names, growth names, Momo names that are smaller. Of course, software as a service was getting annihilated. Some AI things were getting beaten pretty hard. But now, right, you're just a little tiny bit of a push to get above all SMAs again in SPY. And remember, this is our main proxy. If you do that and the 10 is, let's round it up to 691, right? You're about 1% away, roughly speaking, from you're 1% away from the new and making a new all-time high, much like the diamonds have already done. Right. So I think in the end, like as bad as this was at one point, this save that I'm sure some people are frustrated by, and I can understand that because it's very right, it's very gang-esque. This is what they do. And you don't know if you just don't know, going back to spies real quick, you don't know if one more day, there's going to be one more day down, right, where they do actually drop to the 150 and then they put the rally together. You don't know that, of course, going out yesterday, or it just stops at the 100, and then they do this today. But that's what they elected to do it today. So, and it just seems like there's a lot to it. It's very forceful. The diamond's breaking out to a new all-time high. Right, this look continues to look good. I don't even have to really say it, but as you can see, right, these uptrends as we've maintained the uptrends have maintained themselves. In other words, we continue to say they remain intact. They remain intact despite all the noisy trading, right, and shaky feeling and all the developments. That's the one thing we have to keep harping on and probably allow that to override, right? If you're really struggling, you probably, as we said, we always have to go back and say, oh, the trend is up because in the end I don't know I've never seen anything that's really more bankable than sticking with the trend. When you're at that sort of tough point where you can't come up with a real forecast. At that point, unless you really see some pattern or some sort of activity, behavior that just has told you this is shaky, really shaky, in the end, you go with it unless you get the breakdown. Now, I think we were right to stick with I think we were right to stick with keep your DEF CON shields up. We've had that for 3 Fridays in a row. So that goes back a little bit now, but we got this. I think let's see when that was. 16, yeah. So we were talking about that here. We talked about it the next Friday out right from there, and then we talked about it. We're talking about it last Friday, and then we dumped the DEF CON shields. We just were more in. Just remember where you put those shields in case you have to go back to them. For now, don't let them get too far. But you could kind of look at this, and I know it's not a bottom, but you can kind of look at this as a double bottom. I mean, some people are going to prefer the W description, whatever. People get hung up on everything. But bottom line is you're 1% away from all-time highs and you just absorbed, right, a ton of selling. It was really ugly beneath the surface. Fear, as I say, fear got ratcheted up and you're really roaring back. And there's a lot of UOA suggesting that you're on your way to more. So I would say that I would think there's a better than 50% chance news neutral assumption that you go back and you attack the all-time highs. I mean, just because, right, you're in day one and you're in day one of the strong reversal, right? After real felt carnage, right? And real psychological concerns. People were really rocked by that. A lot of, I think, growth investor, high beta type players, they were feeling it, this week. And well, the last couple of weeks in different ways, but especially this week. So I think that looks really good. It's pretty hard to say that the IWM does not look good again, right? Very similar situation where they dip it right below the 50. You took out all the lows you've had, prior to it during the week, dip below, and then they've got it roaring back, and if I take a trend line for us here and I draw across the most aggressive trend line that I feel comfortable drawing, and you'll get people arguing over this shouldn't be drawn this way, by the way. I'm just letting you know if you're newer to this stuff because there's someone that's going to tell you that you're doing it wrong. Most of those people happen to live in Philadelphia, but most people, there's a lot of people out there who are going to say you shouldn't draw that line that way. I'm comfortable with that line personally. I do what works for I do what works for me. But to me, that you're breaking out already. And look at this candle. It's super strong. So I think you had an emotional, sort of short-term emotional extreme here, risk extreme. A lot of people feeling that, and they're at in typical gang style. When it gets extreme, right? They find a way because they've got the deep pockets. They've got everything and they turn and burn. And that's what you're doing. So again, I would expect there to be a follow through here. Again, news neutral. I don't see news neutral. Nothing big changes over the weekend or Monday morning. I don't see why they don't just keep going with this. Is my take on it. I don't know what would stop it in its tracks now that it's got here. And you could say, well, wait a minute, couldn't this be a false breakout? Sure, it could. I'm just saying, right, this is not a breakout attempt that's wimpy. It's not a breakout attempt that happened after just a little bit of selling. I think it was fairly capitulatory, right? Would be my way of looking at it. And it's not every day that you're up 3.57%, right? So that's a really sort of like a statement. Now, you do see other times like that, but usually, remember the difference between this here happening and this here happening is, right, you could see that this was a little bit deeper oversold. You got well below the 100 day there in white on this ramp job here out of this corrective phase here. So now you're in this other corrective phase. You didn't even get down there. So this is sort of showing strength. This is showing strength relative to this one, right? Because you didn't dip as far. So you've got to give them got to give them that. Even if you're frustrated today, I think you've got to give them that. I think people could be, is why I'm saying that, and I'm not picking on anyone, but I'm just saying we were trying to prepare. We of course we don't know what's going to happen. So when I finally saw some bearish paper show up, I had to get some ideas in there in case we did have another leg lower or we had at least another one or two bad days. But I had that sense of all of a sudden this bearish paper is showing up. So either people are hedging late was my way of thinking about it, or people are hedging, or I'm sorry, or people are speculating. I should say hedging or speculating late, or it's a lot of put buyers that are have now decided they want to start buying stock because things have gotten discounted in those particular names that we saw the put buying in. So I mean, as a former market maker, desk trader, it always goes through my mind there's a good chance that's happening after there's been a big move. Just like we had some call buyers show up when the market really jammed, and then I was like, geez, oh boy, these guys are showing up late in the game but on my technicals, and I felt like this could definitely be synthetic put players. But here's the cues. We'll cover those a little bit. Those to me, right, obviously they have the biggest road in front of them, and they've got to work their way up and through the 100. Then you've got the 20, 50, 10, and 15 sort of all colluding together right near that 620 level. So, but I mean, just with the kind of carnage we've seen, and the fact that they've got SMH roaring back, that to me is, that's a good sign because this is on the verge of breaking out. Remember what we talked about with NVIDIA? We talked about this and this after really just being atrocious, right? You really have regained most of the drop with one session, one turnaround session. And this is why I started putting some bullish ideas in today that were the triggers were relatively far away, and people were probably like, "Is he typing this stuff the right way, or what's going on here? Is this voice text? It's not recording." Because I try to get good triggers that are meaningful, that I think will matter in the dynamics of the charts that will actually produce follow through. And sometimes, right, I don't want to overdo that when it's fast markets and things are moving quickly, and I don't think the risk is as high, I'll try to bring them closer. If I think the risk can be higher, I don't want people just jumping in willy-nilly because not everybody has good trigger management discipline, unfortunately, even though the main service that we work on is a pro service. But having said that, I really put some that were pretty far away. I pretty much remember maybe it was MU that was fairly far away. I think I may have used like I don't remember now that I think about it, I can't remember what it might have been a flat line level there. I just can't remember exactly what I used. But the reason I'm bringing this up, and I think I used the all-time high here. I wanted some things that to really demonstrate that they really were turning around and being able to show that they were going to sustain that. But other things that were far away, further away, which I can't recall at the time, that I put in today, they were pretty far away in terms of a percentage move. But I really wanted them to. I really didn't want to miss them either. So I want those. I want those. I don't want to set alerts on those. Have them in our and not have them in our log. Because of other people and everyone trades differently. Even twins would trade things slightly differently, probably. But some people like to be more aggressive, right? So I want that in there because they could. This is the kind of move if this holds up for the next 30 minutes, and there's maybe even good news to open the week. This is the kind of thing that could produce gaps because it's been such a forceful turnaround. So they might start gapping away. I'm not predicting that. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying they could start gapping away from people that maybe didn't buy in yet. That's what they often do. We've seen them erase sell-offs so quickly in the modern era, right? Because everybody's obsessed over, the FOMO factor is just, I don't think it's really been uh, anything. There hasn't been anything like this, overall with everybody trying to jump in and being a dip buyer. But having said all that, if we look at all these one more time, right, breaking out to new all-time highs, almost the entire candle, not only did you gap up, but they just bought the whole time, right? That's ever since you gapped up, they bought the whole time. If you close here, spiders, right? Same thing, gap up, they buy all day. You open near the lows, practically not on, but near the low, and you just power up, right? IWM, very similar. Open and power up. All of these things are either breaking out or on the cusp of breaking out. And then you've got finally the Qs, and they're like as I say, they're really the outlier. Normally, we're accustomed to seeing them as the leader. We're used to that, but here you are, where I think they still have a great setup with the lower low, the puncturing and reversal below the 150. They could be through. I'm calling this resistance, but we all know they could move through that no problem, right? Especially if they get NVIDIA SMA, sorry, NVIDIA SMH going. And if you look at it, right, NVIDIA is right on the cusp of breaking out too. Right now, will it be a real breakout? We don't know. Jury will be out even if it tries, but it's really right there. The way that I would draw my line, at least, it's just right there. So, when that starts doing it again, and that's why we were talking about not really, they don't let this market go often in front of the NVIDIA. They like to hold this market up in front of the NVIDIA EPS, but not surprisingly, right, as NVIDIA goes, SMH is going. And then where is the NVIDIA? It's kind of, oh, I'm not all the way over. Oh, there it is. I was going to say it's later this month, right? Yeah. So we're looking at by the time we come back, it's going to be about what, 9th to the 25th. So it'll be 16 days, a little over 2 weeks when we start trading again on Monday. So there you have it. We did have paper in Avgo, aka Broadcom. Another one. I don't even have to draw the trend line because the blue 20-day is basically your resistance line here. And it's really close to breaking through that. And then you have a few flat lines from there. But, that to me, I don't see, given how smoked everything's become, I don't see how this stuff doesn't trade up in a neutral market with news-wise. I would expect this to follow through and work its way towards the 100, the 50. Of course, that's why it was easy to add these spreads when I saw the turnaround in the UOA appearing this morning after this kind of beatdown. So those are the major four. I'll flash them. I don't think we have to come back to them, but these are the four major index ETFs we cover each week. SPYs being our main, but there's a lot of commentary. I think that we'd spend some time on this, and I think it's worth it because this is standing out pretty powerfully. The diamonds are now really leading, and then you've got Main Street on the cusp of attacking its high. I mean, that could trade there on Monday. The way that I love IWM as a trader. I've mentioned it in these weekend videos. We had it as a name this week in our Rebel Pit Pro, which is more of a momentum service, and just you can just trade that. The volatility is very reasonable most of the time, and you can get in there and get really good movement potential on the cheap. So I would encourage folks to take a look at that because that is to me that's worth it. It's worth the time. It's not an easy one to trade at times, but give you an idea. Let's take a look. Remember, this is on Friday. This is going to be cheaper. So yeah, I mean, you're going to be able to play the slightly out of the money in there for about $3. Theta is 26 cents per day. You can't, it's already been somewhat discounted for Monday morning, but I'm going to ballpark that and just say, let's just say that you could get into this for about 270, slightly out of the money call if we close near $1 out for about 270. And given like that this thing can move 3 or 4% a day at times, like it's doing today, what's there 3.5%? If you can catch this, you can really get really good rides. Obviously, look at the tight bid-ask spreads. The liquidity's very good on that. If you're trading 10, 50, 100, you shouldn't have any trouble. I mean, look at some of the penny wide markets. So it's a great trader. When we go to that when we feel like it's just too good of a name to pass up in terms of the potential. So that's that. Now let's wrap up on other things though. Let's take a quick look at market breadth, which really kind of got right here. Market breadth kind of got battered in some ways, and then it also did very well in others. So I would say, right, look at this. Okay, there's your I'm sorry, advanced decline cumulative, right? You're powering to new all-time highs. Look at these stocks above their respective SMAs being the 50, 100, 200, right? You would think, well, that's probably had it rough, right, this week at one point, but really it didn't even fall that much and it's working its way back up, not far from recent highs. Again, here's your cumulative volume index, right? Just off the all-time high, right? So bullishly, that's obviously bullish. McClellan, the summation index continues to be on the uptrend, although it's dipped a little bit, but it's still maintaining trend. And the shorter term, more responsive McClellan oscillator, that thing dropped down, and now it's coming back too with the way things are ending. So this is a pretty good look overall. Look at your new highs versus new lows. Look at that, right? You can see it just continues to be green. And really, if you take it from really the last major corrective phase, or even another minor one, I mean, you could just see it's sort of still strong, and today is very good. So overall, right, the whole bearish situation, as is often the case after there's been a rough week, these guys in an uptrend, they've really reversed things on these bears at the end of the week. So pretty overall pretty rough stuff. Now, this is, I think, where it gets really interesting in terms of wrapping up the whole discussion. Some of the major sectors we like to look at are the transports, the financials, and the energy space. Energy, look at this. And we've had a couple names in there, not as many as I would have liked, but I think I forget who I added in there. I want to say maybe like Devon, maybe Exxon, but XLE we had other names, and they've just gone. They've just gone. This XLF, like I like that, right? I mean, he came back to the former resistance area. You supported, then you dipped under. Now you're back at it. So all it's got to do is start lifting. It'll be back above there, and then again in a bullish market, I think it gets its feet back under it again in most news neutral, most likely scenario, and just probably tries to start challenging again. So that's two out of three. And then look at XTN down here. I mean, XTN just powered to a new high, and we had I forget where we had UPS. I want to say we also had like J Blue, some other airline that came in. There were a couple. Um, and so that's obviously right. That's doing extremely well. So you've got that. So the complexion really changed there. A lot of the sectors we like to see as coming along for the ride they are coming along for the ride. And you can see here that the basically right your XLB, your XLI, those are getting back on the horse. Now, the problem I have right now in something like XLI and XLB is that I think long term we've been talking about materials looking like a great place to be, and it's pretty hard to argue with this XLI chart. Look how strong it's been relative to other things. I feel like the problem right now is just short-term overboughtness. That's the problem with those two. But this is very encouraging. Obviously, the diamonds are reflective of this. So this is obviously very encouraging. This is not, right? Now, it's good that XLY is making a comeback, but this real sort of veering off, if you will, by XLY and this continued surge by XLP, I really got to wonder what that's about because I'm still wondering about that. I'm trying to figure out why, usually you look at the XLP as defensive positioning. Is it? I'm thinking it still is, but why are so many people piling into this? We had major put buying, by the way, on this, and I have an alert set because I don't like to, I've said it many times, I don't like to pick fights with things that are on their way up, right? And that's the trend clearly, and it's strong. So what we have to do is just as it continues to move up, knowing there's put players in there that they could be a little bit early, what we want to be able to do is just continue to have alerts trigger, right? So you can then go back and check to make sure the open interest is there if you're really dependent upon the UOA complexion to inform or guide yourself taking the position. But I just feel overall, getting back to the general discussion, this is a little concerning to me. I'm not sure again what's up with that, but I think it's something that bears watching at this point. Couple other defensive sectors hanging in there in XLV, XLRE, the real estate sector that's heading back up. This could also be at this time because they've got rates. I think they've got rates coming down dramatically this year now, based on some of the what's transpired economically with the new Trump, I guess, guy heading to the Fed. So there's probably something to that, maybe a reason for that to be the case. I suppose, right, that helps. The interesting thing over here, though, former leaders, they're just not getting it together, right? We were looking at XLC really doing it with Google, but you could see how this week that just hasn't happened for that sector. And XLK, which is very similar to the way the Qs trade, right? Obviously looks a lot like the Qs, and it's just not there yet. Now, you did put a higher low in, and so on and so forth. So I don't think you could rule out more comeback here, but it's definitely not leading. In a way, you could spin that to be good because you could say, look what's going on without the normal lead sled dogs, XLK and XLC, that were that way for so long. We're making new all-time highs, or we're very close to it. And we don't even have those or the megas really firing the way they were. So if they get those things firing, what happens then? So I think as of right now, you got to walk away from this week. It's snapshot in time always, but you've got to walk away from the week saying this is pretty positive. I mean, overall, it's pretty positive because you're so close to break a breakout attempt, which could be six. What happened to my? I'm trying to figure out what just happened to my chart there. We're supposed to be. Oh, there they are. They came back out. They were hidden behind there. But on these four, you're either breaking out over here in diamonds, on the verge of this breakout, maybe following through in spiders and in IWM. And you could, again, within one day, I think I would put it, I'll just put the line there, but it's pretty much going to be where the 20-day is anyway. But you're one session away from, in my book, the diamonds, I mean the Qs being at one really good session away from the Qs even being in a breakout position. We're very close to one. So, excuse me. So that's all looking really good. And just looking at the very basic, let me get more of a basic chart. I hope a basic chart shows up. Let's try this one here. Mm, not what I wanted. Oh, that's the 1 hour. For some reason, that's got the 1 hour. Okay, yeah, there you go. Not what this is still not the right chart though. That was stupid. Pick that one. Let's get this one. Is this my clear? Yeah, this is the clean chart, if you want to call it that. But yeah, you can just see you can see the structure better here. And given that, given this right here, come on, this I want this to slide up a little bit for us. But yeah, this is what I'm getting at, that um it's very clear to be seen there. So really kind of like a nice textbook pullback for a few weeks, takes the overboughtness, the froth out, and you then start getting ready potentially for another leg up. So that's what we could be on the cusp of. And if you do get there, I would ballpark. If you do get through and go, we'll put together an optimistic look. That's going to be, let's see, that'll be there, there. That's going to be low. Yeah, I think so. I think you're looking at maybe a move to about 275-ish ballpark. So that's another 5% that we could power from here, which would be a nice move. That would be a nice extension. Then we'll see. We'll see what happens from there. But that would be one of my preliminary, just quick and dirty targets that you could trade up that far. So I think they've got a lot going for them. I think in the absence of news, I think bulls have really regained control of this market, or are about to fully regain control of the market. They just need to have a little bit more follow through, and they should be able to at least make a run for the all-time highs in spiders and IWM, already done in diamonds. As we said, Qs are a different story, but that really wouldn't be that hard the way the Qs can move, especially if they start a pre-EPS run into in NVIDIA, right? If they start to get a run together, and I'll remind you like of what these look like. It doesn't always happen 4 or 5 days before, but notice, right? Microsoft's getting the tar knocked out of it, and then suddenly, right, it's a bat out of hell right in front of EPS. So that's what I mean by a pre-earnings run. It can take weeks, but this one was about five sessions or so. If you start getting that in NVIDIA, um, that you break out and then you work your way up, I would not be surprised that they try to work this thing back to here. And you might say, well, wow, that's a lot, and it is. They kind of have that wide sort of double bottom in place now, right? And they've really churned people now for a while in here, and they've got a lot of people questioning the story, right? Psychologically, well, wait a minute, is this all? And there's been a lot of news stories about the whole thing, but um, the gang is going to push stock prices up at all costs in most cases, and then ask questions later. And the best example of what they do is they took Microsoft up manically, and then, right, who cares? Tried it again. Who cares? Who cares if it's maybe overdone, right? They don't care. And then, on their time, when this then later when people were questioning the story here, right, it didn't matter. But when people started questioning the story here and more as we started rolling over, then and what the CEO had to say and and the developments and so on, then right, some of those people that were questioning the whole situation here, it was kind of borne out that they were right back over here, but it doesn't matter, right, when the gang is moving things up. You can be dead right and you can be annihilated by the gang, and that's why I think you really have to try to use your charts for timing things. So you might be onto the right story, and you might think that the whole NVIDIA thing is overdone and none of this stuff's going to work out, but I'm going to say trend is still intact. They've had a relative, if you look at the kind of move, well, if this would stop moving for us, boy, if you look at this massive move, right, that they had last year, and then you look at what percentage of the gains they've held here, and I'm just going to dump this. We don't need that anymore. It made it to the target anyway. But they've held on to just ballparking without using a retracement. They probably have held on to 80% of the gains, something like that, somewhere in that neighborhood. So, I mean, that's not, when you think about it, that's not really a big give back. That's not a big dip. So I know there's been a lot of frustrated NVIDIA longs. What's going on with NVIDIA? It's not doing this. And people are used to NVIDIA acting like this or like this, and it hasn't been, but it could again. And I think you got to look at it almost as a sign of strength that it hasn't given back more. Yes, it's probably been frustrating if you're along in there for the last, let's say, even 6 months, maybe even longer. But there's a lot of energy stored up. And given psychologically, as I continue to say in this recording, given what they did psychologically here this week, I think a lot of people are probably feeling, whiplash, shell shock. So it would be kind of, for them, it would be kind of wild if, right, like a lot of people would have a hard time grasping that, hey, how are we possibly going up so violently now on the upside after what we just saw? But think about it, right? That's what they do. So anyway, I think I'm going to end on that note and just we'll go back to our final four, and you'll be able to see them. But they're actually powering up really here into the close. Overall, they're really acting well into the close. So I think more good stuff, barring any bad news. And then we see if they're able to continue to bring more stocks along for the ride, maybe get some of the megas involved, maybe get the former leadership sectors to join what's starting to be a potential party here. And if they do, we could really have another leg higher into maybe later on into the month and into really the end of not the end, but towards the end of the first quarter, I think. So on that note, going to wrap up. I do hope that something I covered or share with you this week helps you out this week. And if it doesn't help you this week, I hope it helps you some other week in the future. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Have a great weekend, safe weekend, a healthy weekend, a great week ahead. And I'll be back at it next Friday. Everyone take care.